It was late summer, 1948, when the evening train slowed into the small Yorkshire station, and a railway porter froze at the sight of a thin man stepping down. His boots were cracked at the seams, his jacket shiny at the elbows. He carried a worn canvas bag and moved carefully. The porter recognized the face from the post office window during the war, framed in black beneath a card that had read, "Private Harold Johnson, killed in action, France, 1940. Yet here the man was, crossing the platform, alive. Police met him at the barrier after a discreet call from the ticket clerk. In a back office, the man gave his name, Harold Harry Johnson, and the address he had left 8 years earlier. He spoke in the same local accent people remembered. He could list the streets in order, name the pub his father favored. But when questions turned to the war, his gaze slid away. He remembered the call-up papers in 1939, basic training at Catterick, the ferry in the Channel fog. After that, fragments, a hospital veranda in heat, fields of cut grain, a woman counting slowly in a language he took to be Italian. None of it had dates. None of it had names. The War Office file was simple and final. Johnson's battalion landed in France before Christmas 1939 and wintered on the Somme. In May 1940, as German armor drove hard across the front, the battalion fell back under air attack and shelling. Johnson was last recorded near Abbeville during the retreat. A week later, his name appeared on the missing list. By July, with no Red Cross report, the Army wrote to his parents, "Missing, presumed killed." The vicar said the words. The family laid an empty coffin in the churchyard because grief needs a place to stand. 8 years later, the Army had a problem paper could not tidy. Investigators brought maps and notebooks and asked for anchors, officers' names, platoon numbers, the shape of a church tower, the color of a village roof. Johnson could not fix a point on the map. Show him photographs of towns in Picardy and Flanders, and nothing moved behind his eyes. Mention Abbeville, St. Valery, Arras. No light. Ask what came after the Channel crossing, and he would say only that there was heat and work and a hospital veranda screened against insects. He remembered a whitewashed building with vines and a nurse who counted uno, deux, tres as she changed dressings. The images were solid. The trail they promised did not exist. Doctors took over. A physician noted faint shrapnel-type scars on the shins, a healed rib fracture, and teeth worn down. His weight was low, his hands were strong. Psychiatrists disagreed politely. One wrote, "Dissociative amnesia following extreme stress." Another believed he had lived as an unregistered laborer, and the mind had sealed the door on years it could not bear to catalog. The Red Cross searched prisoner lists and sent back negatives. French prefectures and Italian communes checked hospital ledgers and parish registers. Nothing. If he had lived inside the margins, misspelled in a ledger or traded by word of mouth to farm after farm, paper would not catch him. His sister, Margaret, came to the station with her scarf knotted tight against the wind. Their parents had died during the war, she with an illness in 1943, he of a seizure at work in 1946, and never knew there was anything left to hope for. Margaret recognized her brother at once, and yet not completely. He held her too lightly, kept one hand on the strap of his bag as if ready to move. That first night, set in the small back bedroom of her terrace, he woke at 3 and sat on the edge of the bed until daylight, eyes open, breathing steady. The town received him with curiosity that softened into caution. Some called the newspaper. Reporters came, wrote headlines, "Soldier back from the dead," and spun theories, spy, deserter, partisan. Johnson answered without drama and refused to embroider. He had no story to sell, only a gap he could not fill. A veteran from his regiment hobbled in on a stick and swore he had seen Johnson behind a garden wall south of Abbeville, firing steady while others ran. Johnson listened hard and then apologized. He did not remember. The Army amended the record because a ledger must meet the living. Return to United Kingdom, 1948, replaced killed in action. Back pay, calculated by someone who never left a desk, arrived as a sum large enough to feel like a mistake. Johnson banked most and gave the rest to Margaret for rent and coal. He found work as a handyman, fences, sheds, panes, hinges, anything that kept him out of crowds and in the open air. Loud noises made him flinch. He preferred long walks by the canal to the market square and side streets to parades. He kept his hair short and his boots clean. The War Office kept trying. Every few months he traveled to a regional hospital for tests and interviews. Sodium amytal sessions produced fragments the doctors wrote down in tidy columns. Marching boots on dust, a ditch bright with water, a stone lintel warm to the touch, a voice counting uno, deux, tree, a whistle he associated with work starting. None of it placed him on a map. Letters went to Geneva, Paris, Rome. Files came back with formal regrets. If he had been a prisoner, he had not been recorded. If he had worked on a farm, no one kept the kind of ledger the state could find. Margaret folded him back into the town as best she could. On Fridays, he carried her shopping home. On Sundays, he sat at the back of church, head bowed when the prayers turned to the fallen. Sometimes he paused outside the Italian bakery and waited for the first loaves, then stood there breathing in the heat until the paper bag warmed his hands. The baker's wife tried a greeting in careful English. He smiled and answered with a few uncertain words that surprised them both. Work steadied him. He repaired a greenhouse at the big house outside town and kept the glass shining like water. He rehung doors that had sagged on old hinges. He replaced a gate on a farm track and, looking up from the latch, watched an aeroplane lay a white line across a hard blue sky. It was hot where we were, he said, almost to himself, and could not say where that was or when. He tied knots the way the depot had taught him. Years passed. The outrage of the headlines cooled into the quiet of ordinary days. He sent Christmas cards to names from the battalion list. Half came back stamped, "Gone away." He kept the cards in a biscuit tin with the Army's letter amending his record. He did not drink much. He did not raise his voice. When children asked about the ribbon he kept in a drawer, saved from a parcel his mother had sent to camp in 1939, he said only that it was from before and closed the drawer gently. No one ever proved a grand story. There were no medals reclaimed from a drawer in Italy, no witness who could place him precisely, no ledger page that fit the whole. A man had left in uniform, been written off by a war that swallowed names, and returned carrying a silence he could not set down. The likely paths, escape from a capture column, forced labor in the South, a hospital in a hot climate, adrift among farms after the armistice, remained only that, likely. In early 1972, he grew short of breath and would not see a doctor until Margaret insisted. The end came quietly in a county hospital ward with windows that rattled when lorries passed. The vicar read over him. A nurse straightened the blanket as if making a bed against drafts. He was buried in the churchyard where the empty grave from 1940 still stood 2 plots away. Margaret stayed between the stones after the others left, one hand on each, saying goodbye twice. For historians, the case sits where many wartime stories end, with a file closed for want of anything better. For the town, Johnson became a lesson repeated to children who asked about the memorial names. Some men never came back, and one did, with pieces missing. For his sister, the answer was simpler. He had been gone, and then he was home, and whatever lay between belonged to the war, not to them. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.